What's going on, guys? Chip here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG video where today I'm joined by regional champion from Daytona this past weekend, Cate. Drew has had a pretty insane start to the season, winning a regionals, of course, this past weekend in Daytona, also getting top 4 at Richmond regionals with a Gardevoir deck, quite a different version though, with Aromatisse over and expanded, and then also getting top 16 earlier on this year in Knoxville with a Greens Charizard deck, I believe. So it seems like he likes Gardevoir, it seems like he likes greens, and they just kind of came together for Daytona. Drew, how you doing, man? How you feeling after this weekend?
Pretty good. Everything hasn't like fully sunk in yet, to
Sure.
be honest. So,
Yeah, I totally get that. So why don't you, before we kind of jump into, why you chose this deck and kind of run through your tournament and stuff, why don't you give us a little bit of info about yourself for anyone who might not know you? What area do you play in mostly? How long have you been playing the game? And why don't you tell us like what a favorite deck of yours from the past that you've played is?
so, first off, like I kind of wanted to give like a shout out. I'm a part of the Card Guys,
Yeah,
which is
sure.
my team, and we like play test together all the time, and they kind of feel like family. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out to them. And I play in the Nashville, Middle Tennessee area.
Okay.
And uh, probably like one of my favorite decks of all time is actually Zapdos.
Okay.
I played it at the start of this year, and I just absolutely loved how much like you could just play out of the deck with Zapdos because you're constantly like stellar wishing and like pulling resources out. And I played a like really heavy Volkner count in a lot of my Zapdos lists to just like play out of the deck, and that's one of the things that's translated into why I like Green's deck so much is because they play out of the deck.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I've been playing the game for like off and on for about like 10 or 11 years,
Okay.
so quite a while.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely someone who's been around for a bit and all came together this weekend, getting you that regionals win. Of course, I know that's something that a lot of players kind of have in mind as a goal as they're playing throughout their career. Like, I just want to get that regionals title. And it really feels like a lot of players, once they get to that point and get a regionals win, they kind of continue to find success later on through the year. So hopefully that'll be the case for you. But yeah, so we're looking at Gardevoir, Sylveon, Omastar, Lugia that you used to win the regionals. Why don't you, before we kind of talk about the specifics of the list, what did your kind of testing look like heading up to the event? I know you talked about your team and stuff already. I assume you guys probably tested some together.
Yeah, I tested with my team and also a couple other people, Arlo Neal, Alec Geisler, Isaac. I don't want to botch his last name,
Oh, I always mess
Molaski.
it up a lot. Yeah, yeah.
um, and Justin Lambert also helped me work on the deck.
Okay.
I so like already like by default I have a preference towards like the greens decks. And I was testing the deck with the Amistar and just like thinking like the Amistar fixed so many like bad matchups
Okay.
when you can get it out. And we kept testing the list to and like putting in text to like round up some of the harder matchups. And I actually feel like the deck has like a really solid matchup spread
Okay.
with the Amistar added in and with all the text added in. I know that like a lot of people uh have been saying that like some of the matchups are like really rocky and uh not super great, but I don't personally feel that way. I feel like the deck only has like a couple of like bad matchups.
Sure.
It's just like kind of a greedier list because I am playing so many of the one of cards.
Yeah, definitely. So, previously a lot of Gardevoir Sylveon lists we've seen have been playing Xerneas GX as their like two prize Pokemon to like off the prize trade a little bit in their favor. But we see for this tournament you decided to go with Lugia GX instead. Do you want to talk about why Lugia GX made its way into the list and what were the reasons for pulling Xerneas out?
So yeah, Xerneas was like almost the two prizer include. Uh, but I ended up deciding on the Lugia because the Lost Purge was a really, really nice option to have, and I also had other healing outs in the deck, so I didn't really feel like I needed more. I didn't really feel like I needed the Sanctuary GX as much as the Lost Purge GX could like come in clutch.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really nice against like the ADP decks that were teching in one of Lucario Melmetal because you just lost zone their one Lucario Melmetal, and then the rest of the game is pretty straightforward from there. Uh, because you have like Faba power plants to deal with Keldeo, and then if they played on ADP, it's weak to Fairy.
Right.
Um, and it's also a two prizer. So against like Ability Zard, uh, after they knock out like the first Gardevoir, you can promote the Lugia. If they have a bunch of energies on their Charizard, it just hits for more damage. Or you can Lost Zone their 6 energy Charizard to really set them back. And then you have Stealthy Hood on the other Gardevoir so that they can't gust it up with the Ninetales.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it was just like I one of like the best like two prizer like includes in the deck. Well, Xerneas could have also done a similar job and maybe even like a Mimic UGX.
Hmm.
It's just what I ended up preferring the most.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at the other Pokemon, you kind of already mentioned it a little bit. The Omastar here with the Fossil Bind. I think this is something we've seen people kind of play this 1-1-1 line in Green's Zard decks in the past, but I don't know if I've seen anyone put it in Gardevoir yet. What made you decide that this was worth the spot? What was the specific matchup you were kind of having in mind when including Omastar?
I think it did get put in. I think there was a Gardevoir Sylveon list that got top 16 at Latin America
Oh,
that was
okay.
playing the Omastar.
Gotcha.
Um, but the Omastar kind of and a lot of like dolls list weren't really playing like responses to Amistar. Um, and so d just getting out Amistar just says like you win that matchup. And against like Pidgeotto based like engine decks, like Pidgeyblounds and like Bird Control, they have to fill up their bench to get like drawing cards
Hmm.
with the Pidgeys, and if they do that, then they don't get to play item cards if I have Amistar out, which really sets them back. It keeps them from reset stamping me. It keeps the Blown deck from Fiery Flinting. It keeps them from Fire Crystal. And then that in combination with just like staggering my reset stamps so that they don't accrue a big hand, and using Miracle GX even with 6 energy, just like forcing them to have to like constantly have resources is often enough like too much for them to handle, as well as like against certain like Malamar decks, even if you have uh like if you start like with the ability to get out Amistar like pretty easily, it's really nice because they have to get out all their Malamars, and if you are able to get the Amistar out before they can get rolling on those, then it really halts their setup and forces them to like have to miss a few turns. Um, and it's also really nice against like Big Blounds GX
Hmm.
if you're able to get it out really quickly because it keeps them from uh, gusting up a Ninetales that you may be able to like charge up a miracle on, and it keeps them from playing Beast String, which is really nice.
Yeah, for sure. So I think heading into the weekend, two of the more popular decks that people were expecting, and what did end up being two of the more popular decks in the room, were both Ability Zard and Baby Blounds. And you've already talked about this a little bit, but feel like traditionally people have felt like those are two just like really bad matchups for Gardevoir variants. But it seems like, based on what you said earlier, you might not necessarily feel the same way, and maybe due to the inclusion of Omstar. Do you want to talk about those two matchups specifically? I'm sure there are things you tested against and like felt prepared about. Did you feel the same way that maybe those were a little bit of sketchy matchups, or did you feel comfortable with them based on your techs?
I felt pretty comfortable like going into the tournament against both of those matchups. We tested abilities art a lot and came away like favored in
Okay.
testing, like overall positive. Just with like having the two prize attacker and the stealthy hood, as well as just being able to like reset stamp them after uh, they knock out the first Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
kind of sets them back a bit with in combination with Power Plant as well. Um, and a lot of like uh, the ability Zards were running like one Resha Zard because that's the list that did well at Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
And just like getting rid of like that major threat slowed them down a lot because they only played one of. Um, and then uh, with the Pidgeyblounds, I in testing also felt like pretty solid against that deck. Like I've had a lot of games against Pidgeyblounds where I didn't even get out Amistar and I was still able to win the game because I was just like staggering uh reset stamps and going after energy attachments, um forcing them to like burn a lot of resources and having to just like hit everything after you like are just like constantly stamping and hand resetting them. Um, and so a lot of people were saying that those matchups were really really hard, but in I wasn't expecting like ability Zard to really even like make it to day two. I felt like it would have like a low conversion rate, and
Okay.
same
Yeah.
for like the Pidgeyblounds decks. Um, so I thought that if I played against it day one, which I ended up playing against two Pidgeyblounds, and I didn't play against Ability Zard, but uh, I felt like if I played against it day one, I'd be able to do that strategy of just like forcing them to burn a lot of resources by going after their attachments, constant reset stamping, and Amistar if I can get it out, would just be enough to like deal with it day one. Because I might be running into somebody who isn't playing it like as optimally as somebody who'd be playing it in day two.
Sure. Okay, cool. And I think like you already talked about ADP, that being a pretty good matchup. I think traditionally Mewtwo has always been a pretty good matchup for Gardevoir Sylveon thanks to the Fairy Charm Psychics.
Mm-hmm.
So that like covers kind of the main decks. And I know you said at the beginning you felt like this just had a pretty insane matchup spread, and it does seem like that based on what you've said.
Mm-hmm.
But so, what are the couple of decks that you mentioned that you feel like the deck didn't have great matchups against? Like, what were the things you were worried about heading into the tournament?
The only like major deck that I was like really afraid of was Big Blounds GX.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did have like a strategy for it, but against like Big Blounds, if they just like hit everything, there's not much I can do about that.
Right.
Um, I did play against a Big Blounds GX. I played against Joshua Sutherland. And unfortunately he had like a really like bad start game one. Uh and he just kind of like bricked, so it wasn't too great for him. And then uh game two, I started like really, really good. I was able to get out Amistar before he was able to do too much, and
Mm-hmm.
so that really slowed him down a lot as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, if you want to from here kind of run us through what the tournament itself looked like, I know you posted one on the card on your sponsors like a Facebook page and stuff, but if you
Hmm.
kind of just want to run through what day one looked like for you, I imagine you were feeling pretty confident and pretty well tested heading in. So what did the day end up looking like for you?
So round one, I played against a Alolan Persian, Silvally.
Oh, okay.
Uh, yeah, I feel like that's like really like favored matchup because I just like put out Power Plant and then they just like can't see cards, and that's what happened both games. Is I just put down Power Plant and then they just couldn't use Silvally.
Mm.
Uh, so it they just kind of like didn't see supporters either. So it was just like really unfortunate for them. But
Yeah.
uh, in my second round, I played against my teammate Noah Sawyer, who's playing Ultra Malamar. Uh, in the first game, I was able to pull out the win. I was pretty ahead. That matchup's really weird because I have to play around Ultra Necrozma, which can potentially one-shot my
Mm-hmm.
Guardian if they have out the three Malamars. So I had to gust up kill Malamars to make sure that he couldn't do that. And just like in combination with a reset stamp, so that I could keep him from just having the one shot. Um, and then game two, I ended up playing it kind of poorly. I didn't sleep too well at all this weekend or this past weekend.
Yeah.
And I was like playing kind of slow, and I was uh not playing like super optimally, and he punished me for that and got game two. And then going into game three, uh we didn't have much time left, and we just decided to take the ID because teammates, and just that was a really even matchup, so might as well just like ID.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, against round three, I'm realizing that uh, I wrote this wrong on my Facebook post. Uh, I tied against ADP. I started game one really unfortunate. I couldn't get Pokecom to get out Lugia, and they did play the Lucario Melmetal. So I struggled with dealing with that for like a little bit. I was able to knock it out with a Guardian,
Hmm.
because I was able to get a 150 in, and then he attached. I think he attached a choice helmet, so I had to Miracle GX it for. Uh, Actually, no, that may have not been what happened. I I I'm not sure if I think I actually had to like fob away like a choice helmet in order to like
Okay.
take a knockout. And this is an early route, so it's hard for me to
Yeah.
remember.
No.
But
Sure. It's yeah.
I do remember like getting to the point where I was like almost had like a checkmate situation where I had like gusting in my hand. I was gonna take my last few prizes on a damaged Dedenne. And so I reset stamped him to three. And then off the reset stamp to three, uh he managed to get Malalana and a choice helmet. Malalana the Dedenne to heal 120 of 150, and then choice helmet. So I couldn't gust it to kill it for knockout. So I just
Ah.
picked up my cards game one, and then game two I was able to get to Lugia, and so that game ran a little bit smoother. And then we didn't have time to finish a game three, so I took the tie. Um, Round four I played against Baby Blunt's Pidgey. I just did. Uh, I got an Amistar one of the games, and then the other game I just he had like a kind of rough start, and I just did the strategy of like once he did get set up, I just kept like reset stamping him, forcing him to have uh, all of the outs to knocking out my Guardian.
Hmm.
Uh, Round five, my opponent did show up late, and he wouldn't have been able to win on time, but we only ended up finishing one game actually, and it was against Behem,
Ah.
uh, but he wasn't playing Alolan Ninetales that I saw. He was just playing Dolls. So game one was like really like long and grindy, but I ended up winning. Uh, and then because I just had like the deck functions with just like supporters, because I have Cynthia Caitlyn that can
Right.
get me
Right.
back my other supporters. I'm just like constantly healing his 90 damage that he's throwing at my Guardians, and just switching to my other Guardian. Um, so I was able to just like out heal him, uh, and just like get to the point where I knocked out all of his walls. And then round six, I played against another Baby Blonde's Pidgey deck. Uh, Game one, I opened with no supporters, drew pass for three turns, eventually drew out of it. Uh, but it was too gone by that point. I gave it like a couple turns, even though I didn't feel like that game was gonna go anywhere. Because I felt like might as well. But I ended up just like picking up my cards. Went to game two, started lone Lugia, also no supporters, and just
Ah.
like that game went even faster because he just donked me. So yeah, it was a little unfortunate. Um, at this point, I need to win my next three games to make day two. Uh, Round seven, I play against Dullstall. I was playing around like they did have an answer to Amistar just to be safe, um, by reset stamping or miracling the turn that I get the Amistar out. to keep them from having like a Mimikyu GX to like shuffle back in my Amistar,
Yeah.
or I think there's a Celebi that like removes highest evolution or whatever.
Yep.
And if they do that, then I can't. I already used my rare candy, so I can get Amistar out again. Um, so I just like in combination with reset stamp the turn that I get Amistar out. Um, and game one, I kind of like just did that, brought up their every time they Stevens resolved, I was able to hand reset them, and it just went like really, really smoothly. And then I ended up doing uh, the same thing game two. Um, so then I played against a Mew 3 deck. I started off losing the first game. I had not, if I remember correctly, it wasn't like a great start. He was playing a single Lysander Labs, which caught me off guard because he was able to get through my Psychic Fairy Charm.
Yep.
But like throughout the set, I realized that it was just one. So I was able to play around the fact that he just had the one. Game two, he didn't start so great. And game three, I was just like hand resetting him, trying to keep him from getting it to the one Lysander Labs,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't able to get to it. So I was able to win that set. And then round nine, day one, I played against Malamar deck, and in the first round, I started really strong. I was able to heal a lot of the damage that he was putting out, and I saw that he had a dark energy in game one. So I was like, so he's playing the Guzzlord Naganadel. He did end up getting a pretty like unfortunate like double prize penalty in game one for playing a Pokenav and then shuffling his deck instead of putting the cards back on top.
Got it. Yep.
Uh, uh, but and then game two, uh, I was playing around Guznag, and he was also playing a heavy Rosa engine. So I reset stamped him, knocked out one of his Pokemon. I thought Guznag won't be able to knock out this Guardian. And then he hits Rosa, and then Rosa's for Metal Energy Ultra Necrozma.
Oh
So
my
he turns out
goodness.
he was playing Ultra Necrozma and Guzzler Naganadel, which caught me like completely by surprise. And so we went to game three, and I had a hand to start Almastar before he was able to get out Malmar's. So I just like was able to halt the setup and just kind of like knock out stuff before he could really get going. Um, uh,
Yeah.
day
So,
day two, round one, I played against ADP.
mm-hmm.
I was able to win the first game. I started really strong. Game two, if I remember correctly, I whiffed being able to knock out the Arceus style Palkia before he was able to use the attack that searches the energies from deck
Yeah.
and puts them on the Pokemon, which is like really, really unfortunate if I can't like deal with the ADP before they get three manual energy attachments off on it. Um, I think I started Lugia that game and just like couldn't get it out of the active, and just like I had greens options, but I couldn't like search for everything that I needed to search. I was like one card short on like a combo to like be able to get the Guardian out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I ended up losing the second game. I may have like stuck around too long in game two, uh, trying to like pull it out when really I should have just like scooped and gone to the third game. Um, and then we didn't have enough time to finish the third game because I stuck it out. I was also pretty tired, so I was playing slower. Usually, like that's the first round of the day. It's kind of like a warm up round almost.
Yeah. Sure.
So I was like still kind of waking up. Hadn't had enough coffee yet. Um, uh, in and then I played against uh, a Mew box deck, round 11. Um, game one, he didn't start too amazing, and I was able to actually get off a full like sticked energy magical miracle with power plant in play, and like from that point in the game forward, I just was able to win uh, because it's really hard for Mewtwo to deal with that.
Yeah.
Game two, I mulliganed 7 times,
Oh my goodness.
and he, I think that's actually like the most I've ever mulliganed in a tournament. But like he was going first, and he just like turn one, 3 energy onto a Reshazard. Turn two,
Yeah.
3 energy onto a
Yeah.
Reshazard.
Yeah.
And I was like, didn't start amazing. So I was like, okay, we're gonna go to game three. And then game three, I was able to get out my fairy charms, get out my power plants, and win that one. Uh, I think I had like a really like crippling reset stamp on him in like the mid game that kind of set him back a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then I played against another Mew 3 deck. Uh, and in the first game, I was pretty far ahead. Um, he played a Mega Puff and Reshazard, so he had like options to attack with that weren't the Mew,
Yeah.
that didn't weren't restricted by Power Plant, weren't restricted by Psychic Charm. So it was a little bit rougher. Um, and uh, it was like a really really close game. But I ended up not seeing that he had a cross division for game. I just like completely went over my head. Uh, and he uh kind of like took the game from under me. Just like I was not seeing the cross division play. Uh, and in the second game, I was honestly kind of tilted going into the second game because I was like, man, I can't believe I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I played kind of I played like really aggressive in the second game, just trying to like brick him off of like reset stamps and being kind of aggressive with like stamp plant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it ended up working out because I ended up sticking him and uh getting ahead enough in that game to where he wouldn't have been able to really respond, and then it went to time. So I tied that game. And then I played against Rahul's ADP, and this set was really weird because I think so. Game one, he started completely dead, and I just like got off my stuff turn one. Game two, I started completely dead, and he got his
Yeah.
stuff off.
Uh-huh.
And then game three, he was able to get out the ADP. I think we were both able to set up in that game, but when Guardian's able to respond to the ADP, it's really hard for them. Just like me one-shotting the ADP before they get to use their attack that searches out the energies from deck because they're having to manual attach to the Kelios and they just get really slowed down. Um, and then round 14, I played against Joshua Sutherland's Blounce GX deck, and like I said before earlier, it was a pretty unfortunate game one for him. Um, he didn't have like an amazing start, and then game two, I was able to get out the Amistar, which really hurt him.
Yeah. So that closes out Swiss. The winning in, you get yourself into top eight. Looking at the bracket before heading into top eight, did you feel pretty good about where you were seated and about what your potential matchups could have been?
So to be honest, I was just more like tunnel vision on the fact that I made it into top eight. So I wasn't like actually thinking too much about like my matchups at first.
Yeah, yeah,
I
sure.
did, like after like thinking about it for a while, I felt like the top eight bracket was pretty solid. But I was still like really nervous because I wasn't trying to like get myself like too hyped up when like anything could still happen. I could get into a favorable matchup and then just like brick or just like not start the way that I want to start and not be able to pull it out. So
Yeah,
I wasn't like trying to like psych myself up or anything.
for sure.
I just was just like my mindset like going into top eight was just like, okay, I just need to focus on the game. I don't need to psych myself up or like get like too excited or anything. I just need to just like think about what I'm gonna do.
I think that's
And
a
so
really important thing as well because like so many times like I just remember so many examples over the years of people being like, "Oh, this made top 8. This is what their matchups look like. They definitely have a clear path to the finals." And then they just lose in top 8 because like anything can happen, right? It's
yeah,
Pokemon. Even no matter
yeah.
how favorable a matchup could be, there is still a percentage chance that the other deck can win. And it feels like those things happen all too often in top 8, you know. So,
Yeah. And I this was my I think fourth time making it to top 8 situation,
Mm-hmm.
and I was I kind of learned from like my previous experiences when I had like a pretty like solid bracket going into top 8, and then it ended up not working out for me. I'm just like, okay, I just need to not think about it. I just need to like focus on the game,
For
because
sure.
that's all that really matters. So like going into top 8, uh, I played against uh ADP, um, and game one was really really weird. We both started not good. We were both whiffing things really hard. I didn't see a supporter, I think, for the first 3 turns of the game, first 2 turns of the game, and he whiffed metal energy like 3 turns or 2 turns. So it was really weird. But I was able to eventually like get out Guardian and Fairy Song before he could get out his metal energy, which is huge in that matchup because I'm able to just respond to the ADP when he
Right.
does get it out. Um, so I ended up setting myself up for in that game. Uh, I had like amassed like a pretty like solid hand with like a lot of responses. I had the fob in hand, I had the power plant in hand, um, and I was thinking like I can use the Faba and Power Plant now to just GX a Keldeo for 200. And then all I need as my out to winning the game is a greens, which I have a lot of ways to get because I had one in the discard pile. And then Tag Call searches out Cynthia Caitlyn.
Yep.
Cynthia Caitlyn grabs greens. And then, and at this point, he's at 6 prized cards. So he would have to go through 2
Yeah. So
Guardians,
you have
even if
time.
he.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was like, okay, so before he reset stamps me, it'd be a lot more likely that I find greens to get uh a way to like get double custom catcher to win the
Right.
game than it would be to get Faba power plant to win the game. So I just go ahead and use the Faba power plant, knowing that he's probably going to reset stamp me to 1, uh, which I had I think 3 greens left in deck. I had uh, I think a bunch of Poke Gears, the tag calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
You had
wasn't able to
lots of
Altered
outs. Yeah.
Creation GX, so he's 3-shotting my Guardian. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do this now. He reset stamps me to 1, and then I hit the greens off the reset stamp to 1. Uh, so I just immediately go double custom catcher. Uh, and then game 2, I was able to. He goes first, and I'm able to respond to uh the ADP again because I'm able to hit Fairy Song and just like tag switch. The energy is 150 onto the ADP, and
Yeah.
then he kind of had like I don't think he got out of Jirachi in the second game very quickly. So it was kind of like he couldn't dig as much for like outs to like respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it just kind of ended up going in my favor. Um, and one thing uh I did note about his list, a Will's list that I like a lot, was the choice helmet.
Mm-hmm.
If he like choice helmets the ADP, um, I can't just like use Kaleidostorm. I have to use the Magical Miracle to immediately respond to it, which is my GX for the game. And if I'm GXing, then I can't GX to one shot deal with the Keldeo, uh, which is really nice, and I thought is like pretty solid to like help to like kind of counter Guardian.
Mm-hmm.
But in top 4, uh, I knew I was playing against Malamar, but I didn't really know like what kind of variant uh I was going to be playing against. Uh, it turns out that it was just like the like pretty like straightforward like psychic variant.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I really just like game 1 just went like play Malilana heal, let him knock out uh Gardevoir Sylveon, reset stamp, knockout heal, which was good enough to get me through game 1. I did misplay slightly in game 1. I forgot to attach Stealthy Hood to the bench Guardian so that he couldn't ping it with Giratina, which almost could have come back to bite me because he did play the Megalopunny Jigglypuff to like hit for a heavier amount of damage.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in game two, I was able to get out. I had a really strong start, and I was able to get out Amistar really early. And he was only able to get out one Malamar, and I think he mentioned that he prized two other Malamars, uh, which is really unfortunate. So me having like item luck out, and then him already having two Malamars prized, he ended up just like scooping the second game. Um, the finals was really really close. In the first game, uh, I was able to. I think I went first. I was able to deal with the ADP, and then his reset stamp on me wasn't too and it didn't end up being like too impactful. And he also played down a Dedenne in the first game that I was able to get two prize cards off, so I didn't have to even worry about like going through Keldeo. Um, and then in the second game, the reset stamps hurt a lot more. I ended up breaking off one of the reset stamps and just kind of got ran over. And then in the third game, I was able to hit a really really insane so Xander was trying to like play around the fact that he only had two reset stamps and like trying to save the last one for like a really really key turn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, he decided not to reset stamp me after the turn after he had stamped me the first time. Um, and I had power plant and a Pokegear. And so I deck then with he has the I haven't used GX. He has the active Keldeo. I have two prize cards left.
Yep.
And I had game in hand before he reset stamped me. Uh, I tag called a thin my deck for the Pokegear to try to hit the Faba.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I look and the Faba's on top of my deck, like the next card.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh gosh, this is like so nerve-wracking. So I start shuffling. I even like close my eyes while shuffling. I was like, oh my gosh, this is intense. And so I have him cut, and then I'm just like Pokegear. It's like the fourth card off of Pokegear, and it gives me game. So yeah, it was a really really close like final set.
Mm-hmm.
And he played it really really well. One thing that I had seen like a lot of ADPs like may have just not had the opportunity to do that he was doing is just going for like the plus 30 and not like the extra effect where you take the extra prize cards
Right.
against like Guardian because that's all you really need against Guardian. And then it's just like easier to be able to do that and just like get it out and done with,
Yeah.
which I thought was cool. And then just like having Rosa as like an out to reset stamp was really really strong, and I really like that that engine and the ADP list is really cool.
Yeah, and I feel like we'll see a lot of people kind of mimicking Xander's ADP list moving forward in standard. But yeah, nonetheless, you end up getting the W, becoming a regional champion. I'm sure it was definitely a great feeling, especially against someone like as accomplished as Xander. Xander's like won two regionals in the past, so I feel like whenever you get a win against a really accomplished player like that, it also kind of cements the fact like yes, I did this. So, congrats to you once again, man.
Thanks.
So, moving forward in the standard format, do you think that Gardevoir still sits in a pretty similar spot? Would you be pretty comfortable moving forward with this 60 if you were going to San Diego this weekend?
I probably honestly wouldn't. So like going into this tournament, I also like felt like that Gardevoir was kind of gonna be disrespected and people weren't gonna really tech for it or really expect it.
Yeah.
And now like going into San Diego, which I'm not going to San Diego, but like going into San Diego, I feel like people will be more prepared for it. And I feel like if somebody is planning on playing Gardevoir, they want to be prepared for the fact that people will be prepared for it. Like people are probably going to try to play maybe a little Ninetales index to just kind of like that's been like considered like a card that just like autos Guardian.
Right.
Maybe just having like some sort of answer to that. being aware of like the fact that Dull decks are probably going to play some sort of way to shuffle Amistar back in, or a way to deal with Amistar, um, and maybe changing up some of the techs for those matchups that you might try to get countered in.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions I had for you. I really appreciate your time tonight for coming on and running through the tournament with us. I'm sure that people will enjoy checking this out as well. As we close things out, I always want to give a chance for people to do any sort of shout outs or social media plugs or anything like that. So feel free. The floor is yours, man.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to give huge shout out to my team, the Card Guys, for supporting me. And then also my Twitter is at DrewDead_. I'm not sure if the capitals matter on Twitter, but both the
I
D's
don't
are
think so,
capital.
yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much for having me on.
No, absolutely, man. I definitely love getting the insight from players after, big tournaments and stuff like this. So congrats once again. Guys, definitely make sure you follow Drew over on Twitter. The link will be down in the description. Be sure to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed and subscribe to see more Pokemon TCG content. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch at Trainer Chip, all of those things. So we're going to get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks again, Drew. And until next time, take care.